Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to another video. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. My name's Melissa and I'm just not naturally a competitive person in the slightest. Around here we do all types of beauty content. Sometimes I throw a little lifestyle in the mix every once in a while. And I do make 2 videos twice a week, sometimes more, but never less. And on Mondays, we do kind of have a routine video around here. We do an in-depth palette review and tutorial, and this palette of the week is the Lunar Beauty Nude Prism palette. I just recently got this in my BoxyCharm Premium, and I really couldn't believe that this came in the box because it's just recently released, and I really did want this palette, so I'm so stoked to have this. Let me quickly show you what this looks like on the inside if you've never seen it before. Here's the inside color story, and it's a very pink tone neutral palette. And you know me, I really like to dip into a lot of color, so this isn't really something I naturally gravitate toward, but I do like neutrals every once in a while, and this palette is all encompassing of every single neutral tone you need. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a tutorial on something called the Wave Eye look, and I thought it was a great demonstration of what this palette can do. And then the second part of this video is gonna be the in-depth review. So if you're interested in hearing my experience with using this palette and just everything I think about it, then stay tuned to the second part of this video. So without further ado, let's get right on into the tutorial. So for my first step of this eye look, I'm gonna just take a black eyeliner pencil and tightline the top lash line. And like always, if you're ever curious about what products I'm specifically using, I always have everything linked down in the description box. Now for my second step, I'm gonna take my eye primer and just go ahead and throw a few dots over the old eyelid and take my eyelid priming brush and just give that a quick blend. Now something that I've been doing pretty recently, and I did want to show this on camera because it's something I genuinely do, is I take the Maybelline Fit Me powder and I go ahead and set my eyeshadow primer. I've noticed this really helps the overall blending of pretty much any eyeshadow that I end up using. So now we're ready to go into the actual eyeshadow, and I'm just going to take the same brush for all of the shadows I'm going to get into. So the first shade I'm going to use is called Milk Tea. And what we're going to end up doing is creating a diagonal gradient going downward. So as always, I like to start in the middle of my lid, and I just like to take the shadow all the way up to my brow. And remember, do it as light as possible because you can always deepen it up, but it's very difficult to remove. And then once I get it in place, I just deepen it up a little bit so I can see the outline. And then I continue the line all the way to my inner corner. Now the shade that we're going to take below that is called Classic. And like I said, I'm just going to stick with the same brush all the way through this whole entire eye look. And then we're going to start pulling this downward from the bottom of the first shade in the same exact line. And then our next shade is called Moody, and we're going to do the same thing, just a little bit lower. And then finally, we're going to dip into that black shade called Deeper, and we're going to put this on the very bottom. Now once you get done applying all the shadows, just go back in with the same brush and just give them a good blend so you get a pretty seamless look out of it. Now for the last shade on top, I'm going into the shade called Bear. And this is the lightest shade in the palette. And we're just going to fluff this on the upper edge just so we get a very nice gradient. Now the next thing that I do is I go in and I clean up the entire bottom of this look, but I keep the edge kind of boxy looking. And now we're going to take that same black eyeliner that we used for the tight line and do our waterline with it. And then for this next part, I'm taking a very small liner brush so I can get maximum precision, and I'm dipping back into the black shade. And what I'm gonna do is match this outer corner with my lower lash line. And I'm gonna bring this outer corner about halfway in. For the inner part of the lower lash line, I just took the same brush and went into the shade called Tease. And I love how this color looks on the inner portion, but it kind of needs to be built up a little bit. Now we gotta do our inner corner and brow bone, and for both, I'm just gonna take the shade called So Icy and just pat this into place. It's kind of a chunky shade, so you don't wanna go too crazy with it. So I just pat it and kind of finagle it in a little bit, and I'm just gonna pat this onto the exposed part of the brow, all the way to the interior part. And then I'm gonna take my little multi-purpose brush I've been using this entire time and just kind of give that a good blend so it doesn't look so crazy. Same thing with the inner corner. And that's the entirety of the eye look. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other eye, put some mascara on, and I will be right back to let you know what I think about this. Okay guys, here's the finished final look, and I'm done putting on the other eye and the mascara, and I did use 2 types of mascaras. But yeah, this is my take on the everyday neutral eye, and I do love it. I don't think it took me too long, so this is just something that I would revert to every time I needed something a little bit more fancy. I'd say if I took a little bit more time blending and added some false lashes with this, it would really make a statement. But yeah guys, let me know what you think about this look down in the comment section below. But until then, let's move right on into the review. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another in-depth review, and this palette that we're going to be talking about today is from Lunar Beauty, and this is the Nude Prism palette. And of course, this is what I'm wearing on my eyes today, and I will be uploading another short tutorial on how I did this eye look if you're interested. And of course, the first thing I always like to dive into is the packaging on every palette that I review. And just looking at this, is there any other brand that has more exquisite packaging than Lunar Beauty? I don't think so. This packaging is so superbly done. It has 3D texture to it, and it's just so beautiful. I don't think the camera correctly does this justice, but when you hold it in your hand, just the overall quality and the appearance of this really makes me happy. So getting into the interior, you get a pretty large size mirror right when you open this up, and it's a really nice quality mirror. And here's the color story that you get. It's very pink tone neutral, and in here you get 18 different shades weighing in at 1.42 grams each. So that amount is above the average amount of shadow per pan. And I do want to point out that this palette is a mix between shadows and pressed pigments, so if you're sensitive to pressed pigments, please be mindful of that. The ratio on this palette is 12 mattes to 6 metallic formulas, so that's a 67% matte heavy balance. So depending upon how you like your palettes to be laid out, I prefer a matte heavy palette, so this is definitely right up my alley. Real quick, I'm going to throw up some swatches of all the shades in here so you can see how every shade looks swatched out. Okay guys, we're gonna hop right into our routine data check, and this is just where I like to compare all palettes that I review in these 4 certain points, okay? So the first thing I like to look at is if it's a clean formula, and this palette is not clarified as being any sort of clean formula. Next, this palette is cruelty-free, and it is a vegan formulation. And the last thing that I would like to mention is that this palette does have a 12-month expiration date, and that date is located on the back of the palette so you can easily keep track. Next, we're going to move right on into the cost evaluation. If you went out and bought this palette as it is today, it would cost you $48. Breaking that down a little bit comes to $2.67 per shade. Breaking that down a bit further, it comes to $1.88 per gram. So comparing this palette to similar palettes offered on the market, the price per shade is fairly affordable. And additionally, this palette has a relatively affordable cost per gram compared to similar palettes that I've reviewed in the past. As always, we're going to move into the most opinionated section of this video, which is my recommendation. And as you guys know, I always like to talk about the 4 most important points when I get into this section, and that is patching, staining, creasing, and blendability. As far as patching, I didn't have any sort of patchiness while working with this palette. As far as creasing, I wore my eyeshadow look for 3 hours. I know that's not a long time, but during that time, I didn't see any signs of creasing whatsoever. Now regarding staining, although these are pressed pigment shadows in here, I didn't have any sort of staining while working with this. And lastly, for blendability, these shadows are very easy to blend. Now some things I want to talk about really quick is that I do really like that this palette goes very light, then it hits the midtones, and then it goes very deep. You have 3 different options to create depth in your look, and I really do appreciate that because it drastically improves the palette's versatility in my opinion. As far as shade redundancy, when I was playing with the mattes, I really didn't notice too many similar tones within the mattes, but as far as the metallics, those apply pretty similar in tone. So I brought up the question if all those metallics are kind of a necessity in my opinion. I didn't come across any dud shades whatsoever, and I do want to point out that I do really like that there's a matte black shade in here because it does make any palette truly universal. Now formula specific, the mattes are kind of a powdery formula. They were a lot more powdery than I actually anticipated, but like you know, I prefer a powdery formula, so that didn't really bother me at all. And as far as the metallics surprised me. They are a pretty squishy formula, and then when you put your finger inside of them, they compact into the pan. So I'm not sure what kind of formulation that is, but I did want to point that out. And none of these metallics have a base pigment, so they apply more like a topper shade. And I did also attempt all application methods, so I tried my finger, a dry brush, and a dampen brush. And if you want the most run out of these metallics, you are best to use a dampen brush. A finger works just fine, a dry brush doesn't work at all, but the best applications with a damp brush. Now as far as my recommendation, if you were looking at this palette and you're kind of into it and on the fence, I would definitely say go for it. It's a good palette. And of course, I have 3 reasons why I recommend it. And my first reason is because there are so many different variations of the traditional neutral look in here. And in my opinion, there's something for everybody. So no matter what type of neutral girl you are, there's something in here for you. In my opinion, it does sway kind of pinkish, but you can get some heavy brown tones in here. And of course, there's that black that can ground any look that you have. And the second reason I have is kind of a con of this palette, but I did want to bring it up. And again, I want to mention that the metallic formula in here is just not my favorite. I have some formulations in my collection that are just stand out, terrific formulas, and these metallics in here just don't meet the mark what I look for in a decent metallic. These are okay and they get the job done, but they're not my favorite. And for my last reason, I just would like to say that this is just a really beautiful, thoughtful, unique display piece. If you're a person that likes to change your displays for each season, this would be a wonderful palette to display just because it's so pretty. I personally like to display my palette, so this is definitely one I'm going to be interchanging out here and there, and something I'm very proud to have in my collection. So guys, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful, and if you did like it, please give me a giant thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, just hit that thumbs down button, and until next time, bye! If you're new, and you know me, I really like to play a lot. And you know me, I really like to dip into a lot of color, so this isn't really what I... Now, something that I've been doing recently, and I did want to show this on camera, is that... So now we're ready to get... Now, the next thing, I'd say with a little more blending and some false lashes, this look over... So that's really above... As regarding staining, because it does drastically improve a valve's versatility. Because it drastically improves a valve.